Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice, the podcast where the heart of agriculture meets the pulse of today's industry. From policy changes to leadership stories in the Western lifestyle, The Rancher's Voice dives into the stories that matter most to ag producers. Welcome back to The Rancher's Voice. We are coming at you this week with a Capital Edition episode. It's been a little while since we've done one of those. I'm your co-host, Ellie Brighton.
And I'm Raylee Honeycutt.
And we're back together.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks since I've been on the podcast. Ian and Kenny and everybody else that's jumped in has done a fantastic job. So happy to be back and happy to kind of chat about what happens after the legislature.
Yeah. So we've been in interim committees for the last month or so, and these kind of act as, well, they're interim committees. They're committees still meeting even when the legislature's not in session, and they meet like 10 to 12 times, I think, throughout the interim until we get into next 2027 session.
Yeah, so those that aren't familiar with legislative interim committees, they happen during the interim. There are a wide variety of different committees. We attend some of them. We don't attend some. It all depends on the topic and what's on the agenda. This interim so far, I would say that we have attended more interim committees than we historically do, but there's a lot of topics kind of being sprinkled through multiple interim committees that are important to our members, and so we're engaging there. One thing that's important to note about interim committees, if you're not familiar with it, is that the legislators kind of ask to be on certain committees. Leadership selects those folks who are on the committee, and then within each committee, they nominate their leadership. All legislation that comes from an agency also goes before an interim committee before the next legislative session. So it's really important for us to engage in these committees because we are able to kind of participate in the legislative process before the legislature, and we're able to kind of influence when agencies come in and propose or present their proposed legislation. We can influence during that process too to get legislation to a point that we may have influence in prior to a bill even being introduced. So agency legislative processes go through this, but then the committee, based off of their work plan, can also prioritize and have committee bills. And so a lot of times we see those during the legislature as well. So they'll do studies or pick topics based off of their work plan, and at some point in time decide, hey, we want a bill written based off what we've found or our findings. And so we kind of have an opportunity to engage in that process and influence there as well before those committee bills are introduced into the legislature.
And it is really nice going into the session, kind of having an idea of what some of the bills are, or having been involved in the process beforehand makes it easier when there's thousands of bills coming at you.
Yeah. And what's great is it's a great time for us just to kind of continue to build relationships with legislators. We also have the opportunity to kind of educate them more one-on-one with Montana Stock Growers and what we do and those types of things. So really the interim is an important time for work to be done. I know a lot of people just think, oh, that's the legislative session and this is the only time that we are engaging in policy and lobbying. But obviously, many times there's lots of different opportunities throughout the years that leads up to the culmination of a legislative session.
And I would add too with interim committees, which I find interesting, is that they're not the same committees that meet during session. So we see, fewer bigger committees. And then for us, it's nice to meet with and be in front of legislators that aren't on our committees normally. Like, we're in front of the same few committees, I would say, during session, but I already have spoken in front of legislators I never spoke in front of during session because they didn't sit on any of my committees. So that's great for, like Raylee said, the relationship building and then looking into the next session and kind of knowing different people. So
absolutely. So let's dive a little bit into the committees that we did meet with or participate with over the last couple months. The first one, and I mentioned earlier that we engage with some of these committees a lot, and some of them are maybe newer for us to engage in. This first committee, the Modernization and Risk Analysis Committee, or what is known as MARA, is one of those committees that we rarely engage with, but they are wanting to kind of investigate and look at water policy and data related to water policy this interim session. So they met on June 27th and we participated there. For those that aren't familiar with this committee, really they look at kind of past and present and future studies related to state revenue. That's really the bulk of the work that they do, and how do they project what state revenues might look like and what legislation might affect that state revenue. But they also kind of look at and disseminate just general data sets as well. And so I was in that committee kind of participating because exempt wells was talked about, and the need to provide potential mapping for legislators to better understand exempt wells. And while we appreciate, the need and the interest around exempt wells, we're kind of entering that conversation with caution because, as many of you know that are listening, water law and water policy is a very complex issue, and one map will not tell the full story. And so we want to make sure that the data sets, if they are created and used, are not kind of siloed and not showing the full picture of water and how water is utilized or stored or legally available or physically available, and all of those things through this committee. And so we'll be watching it and tracking it fairly closely. Representative Lou Jones is the chair of that committee, and so we will be in and out of the MARA committee.
Yeah. And so I didn't sit through that committee, but I did go to the Revenue Interim Committee, and that's a fairly self-explanatory name. They oversee the Department of Revenue. The chair there is Representative Larry Brewster, and the vice chair is Senator Dave Fern. So the chair is from one chamber, the vice chair is from another chamber, the chair is from one party, the vice chair is from another party. So there's representation across the board there. That was a really interesting committee meeting. As you guys will remember, the session was full of property tax conversations, and specifically the end of session. And then we've seen the new pieces of legislation there, and it's been a hot topic since session ended. So they chatted a little bit about property tax. The Department of Revenue talked about what they are looking at for the next tax year, and then also for 2026. I will say more generally, and they would tell you this too, they're still really going through what this legislation is going to look like and how they're going to implement it for constituents, for the people of Montana. So I didn't necessarily feel like I came away with any more answers. I think everyone's still in the let's figure it out stage of this. And then they do oversee some study bills. We mentioned this, all the agents or all the committees have study bills in them. This committee actually only had one study bill assigned to it, which is pretty unusual, I would say. And that had to do with tax districts. So with the rest of their time, members can bring forward topics. And so they will talk about all kinds of other things, and we'll see what that looks like. So what those other topics look like will kind of determine how we engage in revenue moving forward, I would say.
Yeah, I would anticipate that the property tax bills and that topic in general will remain a very high-level topic. Definitely. As we go through. I think, from our members that attended mid-year this past May at our summer meeting, and as we move into the close of 2025, and just speaking with the department, the department is still trying to figure out what all of the provisions within the tax bills that were passed, what they look like, how they're going to affect people specifically, for us, how they're going to affect landowners. Mm-hmm. And this policy that was passed is for 2025. So they're kind of having to retroactively put things into place before even forms and things like that are filled in and gaps are created. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see where that goes, not only from the Interim Policy Committee in Revenue, but just all the work that Department of Revenue is doing.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Yes. So another important committee is Economic Affairs. So this one met on July 22nd, and Economic Affairs, again, is fairly self-explanatory. It kind of oversees all the agencies and takes on study bills and things that relate to economics in the state. So Department of Livestock, Department of Ag, the Department of Commerce, and the Governor's Office of Economic Development all fall under Economic Affairs Interim Committee. They had 6 or 7 study bills, I believe, assigned to them. And one of them was the Cattle Committee study bill. We spoke on this bill. They ended up allocating a few hours of their time for a roundtable discussion in regards to the Cattle Committee. It was ranked 30 out of 36 as far as priorities from the legislature. So that's kind of where they placed it. The Speaker of the House, Brandon Lear, is also the chair of this committee. The vice chair is Senator Ellie Boldman, and he was also the sponsor of that bill. So I felt like we had a good conversation there. And then there were other member topics that were brought up during that meeting. It was a very strong discussion, I would say, on the state fund and kind of that process and insurance there, and then also risk insurance, like with fires and things, as home insurance and whatnot has been raising across the state. So that will be an interesting committee, I think. In the interim, they're covering a lot of big topics.
Yeah, I'm excited that fire topic and kind of risk insurance and protective insurance is going to be a topic, I think, across the board, no matter what industry you're in. Many Montanans are struggling with it. And we saw, in California when the Palisade fires where, so many homeowners insurance was canceled because they were in a high risk area. And so glad that our legislature is kind of taking a look at that and doing a deep dive into what they can do to kind of help mitigate and protect Montanans as it relates to risk and fire and those types of things.
Yeah. And they brought up the Palisades fire and what that's looked like for insurance. And then also across the board, I mean, all the legislators, I felt like, had something to say about it, some experience with it, or someone that knew someone that was being faced with increased costs or losing their insurance. So
yeah,
be a great topic for us, as our members are very rural and probably in high risk areas most of the time.
Absolutely. That same day, it was a busy day for us.
It was a busy day, dividing and conquering.
I was at the Capitol as well in the local government committee. Again, this is a committee we kind of watch peripherally. We don't really necessarily engage with a lot, but exempt wells and water was in this committee as one of their proposed work plan topics as well. The agency that kind of falls under this is DNRC and DEQ, but at the same time, MACO, so the Montana Association of Counties, and the leagues of cities and towns play a really key role in this committee since they do represent the local governments across the state. Senator Forrest Mandeville was elected chair, and like I mentioned, one of the topics that was being proposed was exempt wells and how they play into local government. We very much, and I would say this across the board, that you'll see 4 different interim committees wanting to tackle this exempt well conversation. And I think that is a product of Senate Bill 358 and kind of the attention that it was brought during the legislative session, and a lot of people not having the time to kind of learn about the complex issue. And it is a very complex issue. The Comprehensive Water Review worked on it for 2 years leading up to the legislative session. But in local government, exempt wells was a topic. And so we very much stood up to just kind of ask them that we appreciated that they have an interest. Obviously, exempt wells from a land planning standpoint definitely fits within this committee, but ask them to kind of coordinate and work with the Water Policy Interim Committee on water policy topics, just to make sure that, the WIPIC committee or Water Policy Interim Committee is the committee that was formed to deal with water policy issues. And so let's make sure we keep water policy issues in WIPIC, and then, complement in these other committees, whether it's mapping in MARA or land planning and water use in local government, to kind of inform that conversation. So they did move forward with dedicating some time in their work plan to it. And so we will continue to kind of be a partner and a resource in the local government committee as they move forward on this topic.
So do interim committees, I'm asking you this since I don't have a lot of experience with interim committees. Do they work together regularly? Like you said, you were asking that WIPIC kind of takes this on, but then these other committees have peripheral roles. Like, is that a common thing? Do you think they're going to be willing to do that?
Yeah, they do. A lot of times you see it with EQC and WIPIC, and like they'll schedule their meetings the next like one after another so that members can go to both meetings if they're interested. They do joint field trips, those types of or field days. And so yeah, it's very common for the committees to kind of coordinate and either do a couple hours together or have joint presentations or joint field days or field trips.
Okay. Okay. Great to know. Well, as she was talking about committees coordinating, we did have EQC in July 29th, and then WIPIC was July 30th, like she said, back to back. So EQC is Environmental Quality Council. They oversee DEQ, DNRC, and FWP as well. The chair is Representative Paul Fielder, Vice Chair Senator Curdy. Senator Curdy was the chair last interim. So there were just 3 study bills here, and that was House Bill 70, which is fire suppression focused, and then House Resolution 62, which had to do with wildfire safety, kind of similar to our conversation in Economic Affairs about costs to, economic costs, but also ecological costs, and then the risk and cost to homeowners. And then a noxious weed control study bill as well. So they kind of take on anything related to the environment that doesn't necessarily fall into water, I would say. So this council is large as well. I think it's one of the biggest interim committees. So there's legislators on it, but there's also members of the public that have a career or have a knowledge that's really relevant to anything related to land, natural resource, wildlife kind of management. So that was a great committee to be in front of. We supported them dedicating some time to all of these bills. We think they're all super relevant to our members and would be beneficial to the state. So
yeah, and I think you forgot to mention the other topic that they're covering is noxious weeds and the ability and what that might look like from a funding and resource management type of thing, which there was some noxious weed legislation that was not successful during the session. So I know from our members' perspective, noxious weeds are always an important topic and an additional burden and cost to their operations. And so excited to see the state kind of taking a deeper look at noxious weeds, especially as it relates to land that the state potentially owns and needs to manage.
And I'm hopeful they will. During session when we went in to support the additional funding for noxious weed, everybody supported it. It was we want this bill to pass, and it still didn't. So I'm sure that was a budgetary thing, but I'm hopeful that our legislators care about this issue, and I think they will dedicate time to it. So that'll be a great thing.
Yeah, and then as Ellie mentioned, the next day we were in the Water Policy Interim Committee, or WIPIC. That was on July 30th. The agencies that fall under WIPIC are DEQ and DNRC for the most part. FWP occasionally will be in that committee as it relates to in-stream flows, or, right now they have their Milltown water rights that are going into effect. So they'll be in and out of the committee, but really this is a DNRC and DEQ committee. And quite honestly, DEQ kind of got very little time dedicated in their work plan in WIPIC. So we'll see DEQ, but not much. Leadership for that committee was elected, and Senator Wiley Galt was nominated as chair. Vice chair is Representative Jill Cohenhauer. And this is definitely a full work plan. We saw a lot of presentations during that meeting as it relates to water. We also saw a drought and fire outlook presentation, nutrient standards presentation, Anna Pakenham-Stevenson with DNRC and Judge Brown from the Water Court gave a joint presentation on water rights adjudication and kind of the status of that. And then we heard updates on the Milk River project as well. And so lots of kind of updates there, but their work plan is pretty dynamic as well. And some interesting topics. So like they'll be dedicating a little bit of time to a study on endocrine disrupting chemicals or PFAS. But then additionally, exempt wells was a huge topic, and just water in general and water adjudication. So we'll see a lot of time dedicated to that as well. They not only will talk about policies and potentially what policy might look like moving forward. But, from a Montana stock grower's perspective, we were in there very much advocating for the need for a closer look at enforcement and measurement, and really, no matter what policy moves forward, enforcement and measurement need to be a part of that. And I think we were successful in getting that across, and that will be a part of the continued conversation as they work forward in their work plan. And so excited to be working with all of these legislators, and lots happening in this interim. And so this is just the first meeting for most of them. We keep saying work plans, and so either they finalized work plans, which is how much time and resources they're going to dedicate to each of the topics they discussed, or they'll be finalizing it at their next meeting in a September-October time period. And so based off of that, we'll kind of know the finalized topics that we'll be working on in the interim with each of these committees.
Absolutely. So moving forward, as Raylee said, the work plans will be finalized. That'll give us an idea of how much time we're going to spend in each committee, what that will look like. And then we will continue to engage with all of them throughout the interim, where we need to be. But I think even committees like EQC, like they get tons of agency reports. Like they have to get these updates from agencies that's required. And so those are just good places for us to be anyway, to kind of keep a finger on what's going on. So the meeting schedules can be found on legmt.gov if you guys are interested. The work plans will be there too if they're not already. And that's kind of our rundown on interim committees from the legislature. So thank you to our audience for joining us. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and X, and always like, share, and comment. We appreciate it.